Good evening, everyone. It's good to have you here as we meet once again. I call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. We have a roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert,
Here.
Mrs. Jaranek,
Here.
Mrs. Mangan, Dr. Swetchnow,
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Invite everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our board agenda was posted as usual the end of last week. We've all seen it. Can we have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening? Second,
Second.
roll call, please.
Mrs. Jaranek,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. We have minutes to approve from the May 21st meeting. Again, those were posted on board docs to be reviewed. Any additions, corrections to minutes as presented? We have a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jaranek.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is welcoming of guests. We have one guest with us and she's going to be sharing during public participation coming up here. And that is next on the agenda.
Yes, we have Sharon Scovanner.
Hi, my name is Sharon Scovanner. Some of you may be aware that Loveland's drinking water is contaminated with PFAS chemicals. PFAS are sometimes referred to as forever chemicals because they degrade very slowly and accumulate over time in the body. This is especially problematic in communities with PFAS in drinking water because people ingest it many times per day. Because of this, even at low levels, they are very toxic. The US EPA has linked PFAS exposure to many ailments, including deadly cancers, developmental delays in children and infants, including behavioral changes, weight gain, high cholesterol, and reproductive effects. Consequently, US EPA announced in April of 2024 the first ever national primary drinking water regulations, regulating 6 types of PFAS. The rule won't be enforced for 5 years, so it's likely that filtration at the city level will not happen for some time. The most problematic type of PFAS present in Loveland's water is called PFOS. The new rule will allow 4 parts per trillion of PFOS with a health advisory of 0 parts per trillion. Loveland has reported 14 to 35 parts per trillion of PFOS since testing began in 2020. Loveland first learned that there was PFAS in their drinking water in 2020 when Ohio EPA tested all public water systems. At that time, Ohio EPA announced that 6% of public water systems had PFAS in their drinking water. Unfortunately, Loveland is part of the 6%. In June of 2023, Loveland filed a lawsuit against the manufacturers of PFAS, stating in their filing, and I quote, "Even at extremely low levels, PFOA and PFOS rendered drinking water unfit for consumption." So now that we know that our water is contaminated with PFAS, what do the experts say about this? I've attached a copy of some of the statements by leading health experts for your review. But basically, no expert recommends that anyone drink PFAS contaminated water. There are several types of filtration currently available to filter PFAS at the point of use. Granular activated carbon, reverse osmosis, and ion exchange are known filtration options. I've attached some information about this in your packet. I hope that you, as leaders of Loveland School District, take the necessary steps to protect the children in your care from the harmless risks of PFAS exposure. Thank you for your time and attention. And I'd be happy to take questions if you have them, but I understand that that's not allowed. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
You're welcome.
And I'll say a little more about that when we get to the board president report. All right. Administrator reports. We've got a couple there from the business manager. And we also have teaching and learning. Any questions, comments about those reports?
Just a comment that I appreciate the consistency of seeing with our administrators and all of our educators spend time with our students outside of, I have it on. Okay, sorry. So I just want to say, I just appreciate, our administrators and our, staff spending time with our students outside of the normal, classroom hours. We see that highlighted. So, Adam was out with one of our students, and I just appreciate the commitment to our kids and our community, even when it's outside of the normal school day. So thank you for that.
Thanks. All right. Are there any other questions? Move on then to the board president report. And just to say a little more about what we just heard in public comments, Mike and I have talked some about that. And Eric, our thought was to take that up with the facilities committee, have some preliminary thoughts on how we might be able to address that at a building level. Ultimately, if you go to Loveland's webpage, you can see what Loveland is currently doing. They are making plans, as they have to provide long-term remediation, but there's still this short-term time frame in which, could be several years, and young people are the most vulnerable, and particularly with some of the reproductive issues that we would have concerns about. So I definitely think we want to do something, and just finding the best plan that is cost effective and works within our buildings until Loveland's able to address that on a broader scale for all of the drinking water. So we'll send that to facilities committee and be working on that moving forward. All right. We then move on to this. Are there any other comments from board members, other things that are?
Would you like me to give an update on the state funding committee? So just an update on the state funding committee that we have. We met 3 times with the committee members from the community. And then we also, we're at the state legislative conference and met with some of our state legislators. And then we reached out to the 53, Andrew, the other A, Mr. Setters, and Mr. Espy and Mr. Broadwater reached out to the other 53 districts who are in the same situation as Loveland, where from a state funding perspective, we are on the guarantee, not on the fair school funding formula, and we are not at the 20 mil property floor. So these are the 53 districts and we do not have an income tax. So we are the districts that are getting, the only inflationary adjustment is the little bit that we get from the inside millage. So we had a call with those 53 districts. Were all invited to a call yesterday evening. Really great attendance. There was about 36 people on the call. And we're also working, with our partners in the Alliance and with the Fair School Funding Group to continue to try and move that forward. So our next steps are to convene those folks that were on the call last night that are, interested in continuing to participate and work with, the groups that are already lobbying for legislative change around school funding. So more to come on that, but was really happy to see that attendance, and the folks that were on the call were very appreciative of the work that we're doing, and definitely a lot of lean in from those districts. So I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that.
I think in a short period of time, we've certainly, I feel like our voices have been heard in speaking for our community. I can tell you, I've got a meeting set up tomorrow with the executive director, Tony Pottigill, from the Alliance. And I know John's going to be speaking with somebody from the Fair School Funding when it comes to some of the data there. So I feel like we've got good contacts around the state, and being able to work within some of the lobbying groups that are there, but also making sure our community is heard. And I think we've moved pretty quickly. It's gone pretty well.
Yeah, I've just had a couple districts reach out to me today, and one reached out last night after the meeting. So
Good.
it's good that, you know, people are seeing the value in being part of this group, and hopefully, you know, just telling our district stories to the lobbying groups to make sure that, you know, our voices are heard and our community's voices are heard. So that's really what we're about with this process.
One other update on the school foundation. We're continuing to move that forward. We, on August 10th, are going to have an open house for the school foundation from 4 to 6. It's on a Saturday. A formal invite will go out to the community and to the board members. But we are about to launch the website. We're excited. We've had Loveland grad Ben Hoffman designed the logo for us, and another Loveland grad, Olivia Bransford, designed the website for us. So we'll be launching that here over the next couple weeks. We are still looking for new board members or folks that want to participate on committees on the foundation. So looking forward to being able to roll out to our staff, the staff grant program that we've done for a long time, but excited to be doing that again, and hopefully, with a bigger presence this year. So lots of great work happening by community members there as well.
I think the one other thing that we probably should mention in terms of school funding is the piece around vouchers. There's a lot of discussion that's going on statewide about that. There's a big statewide effort for a number of districts have come together to express their displeasure about the voucher system as it is now, and the resources that in essence is taking away from, in effect is taking away from the public system. And so I think we want to continue that discussion, but right now as a district, we've been focused on the other piece and that very specific Loveland way of addressing our funding from within the system as it is now. But I do think the voucher piece is another piece of the puzzle that we need to consider. And we look at our own district where we've had over 600 folks, right, take advantage of the.
Yeah.
And so, I mean,
Yep.
that's a potentially multi-million-dollar expenditure. I don't think we've seen dollar amounts yet on what that actually,
Right.
what people qualified for within Loveland under that system. But it has that potential to be, upwards of $3 million. So it definitely is money that's being spent on education and needs to be part of our discussion as we move forward.
I
So
think it's important to point out of the 600, only 20 are categorized as low income. So, a lot of the messaging around vouchers has been to give low income people more opportunity. But for our district, it's about 20 of the 600.
And
that are
you'll
low
see
income.
across the state,
Yeah,
they've kind of missed the mark on helping the lower income families. It's not done what they had thought. And also in comparison with what we're talking about with the state funding committee, we're talking about a little cost of living adjustment to our guarantee for those 53 districts. It's about $20 million because we wanted to keep it realistic when in comparison, about $1 billion has been spent on vouchers this year alone. And so we think it's a reasonable ask based on other expenditures they've had. So.
Mhm.
all right, thank you. All right, well, moving on then to the superintendent update, and Mike's going to talk a bit about the cell phone policy, which is another thing that's come from the state, and I'll let him speak to that.
Thank you. The cell phone policy, kind of a first read here. We went through and we worked with our principals, also looked at some of the example policies that have been put out there. Really, there is not going to be a whole lot of difference until you get to the high school. Grades K through 6, I'm going to bump down to number 3 on the handout I gave you. Number 3, the grades K through 6, the use of cell phones strictly prohibited at all times. They must be turned off, stored in backpacks or lockers throughout the school day. So kindergarten through 6, We are saying, and that's the way it's been throughout the years, so we're saying that's going to stay the same. Grades 7 through 8 really is staying the same. Students in grades 7 through 8, cell phones are not to be used during instructional periods unless explicitly authorized by the classroom teacher. Permitted usage is at the discretion of the teacher and is intended for educational purposes only. Students have been able to use their cell phones during lunch, and that's gone very well. And so we are going to keep that the same in this policy read. Grades 9 through 12 really is going to be the same as grades 7 through 8, but the cell phone would be allowed during non-instructional times such as lunch periods, which the middle school has, but also passing times between classes, they would have access to it. And so that's the first attempt. It really is, in my mind, releasing a little bit more responsibility as the students start to get a little bit older. It's a difficult conversation because there's a lot of us that would say we don't want cell phones ever, anytime. And it comes down to, I'd use the example of we might say people should drive 55. It doesn't mean they do all the time. And so how that looks and how that works in the school is important. So the next steps, we have worked through the principals on all these grade levels. They're comfortable with that. What I would like to do over the course of next year, we're starting a leadership academy with our staff. We've got about 25 staff members. I really would like to put this in front of them and what's going to work for our kids. Every district's different. You know, you could say you're not going to have cell phones, but how many of our kids have iWatches and are going to use Google Messenger on their laptop? And so it has to be a bigger issue of what's appropriate, what's not. I think the biggest change that the high school will see is the initial expectation for our students is during class, you don't have the cell phone out unless the teacher says you may have it out. And we're going to also, with our Leadership Academy, we're going to dive into what's AI, artificial intelligence. What does that look like for our classrooms? Because that's going to be a big deal. So you've got cell phones and AI and its technology, and how do you teach kids to use it appropriately is what we're here for, right? Is to educate what's appropriate, what's not. And so that's the policy we've landed on. It's a first reading. We do have to have this approved in August, so we'll bring it back in August, and I'm open to any suggestions. But I'm excited to put it in front of our teachers to see what their thoughts are, because just like everybody else, every teacher has a different view. Some might want it, some might not. And how does it look for kids, and what works best in the classroom is what our responsibility is. So.
You also talked about discussing this with your superintendent committee as well, which are the students, correct?
Right. I would love to hear, we're going to have the superintendent's council again. I would love to hear what students have to say. Some students might be harder than us. They might say, you know, it'll be interesting. But I also know that cell phones are it's tough with adults. When we set up meetings, you have to set the expectation that the cell phone shouldn't be out, or the cell phones will be out. And so you do have to have expectations just like adults, but it'll be interesting to hear what our students have to say.
Thank you. So that makes sense to everyone. We'll come back to this. Any comments from
Just
other board members you look at?
just a couple quick ones. And I know that you're in the process of doing this. And to my knowledge, we really didn't have any policy beforehand, other than it was kind of a teacher-driven expectation of what they wanted to do in their classroom.
And we let it go by building. The buildings, like the middle school and high school, for example, would say, even one thing I didn't point out on here on the back with discipline, it's not a district-wide discipline. It's going to be by building. What works for the staff of that building, because ultimately that's who's dealing with it, is the staff. But the consequence could be the first time out in the classroom. It's a warning. You know, we'll let each building decide what's going to work for them, and then administratively support the people in the classroom.
And this goes back to the second part, and we've talked about this over the past couple of years. One of the challenges has been that it has fallen on the teachers to manage this in the classroom, which can be difficult because they're more interested in managing the learning in the classroom. And so I definitely want to make sure that we had good feedback from our teachers about what works for them, because this still puts a lot of the onus on the teachers to manage rolling throughout the day. And then the last part, and again, obviously teachers and administration more than board level, but The discipline section that we have right now, in my opinion, should be measured out a little bit more in policy rather than just, we'll do something somewhere, sometime.
So
Maybe,
in,
which is how this reads.
right. So in August, let me talk to our principals and see, I think the middle school probably already has what they've done at the high school. Mr. Spencer, I'm sure wants to talk to his staff to see what they think is appropriate. In terms of trying to take as much of it off the teacher's hands as possible, saying that the expectation is they're not out during class right out of the get-go, I think does support the teacher in the classroom. Now, are you going to have to redirect kids? Yes, and that's what we do in schools.
Well, and I'm sorry, Lindy, and I agree, like, to me, the perfect institution for this is as we're coming back into the
Yeah.
school year, this year coming in, we
Yes.
have a well-defined policy and plan.
Gotcha.
So great. So I'm glad we're having the conversations now.
Yep,
Yeah,
thanks.
that's what I was just gonna add was that the change management process, I think the touch points, it's just as incumbent on the parents and adults in the kids' lives that we make them aware of the policy change so that they're talking to their kids ahead of coming to school. I mean, there's only so much we can do on that front, but this is one that really is gonna require that partnership. But I think anywhere where we can have reminders, whether it's in that, the first communication that goes
Mhm.
home from a class that says, okay, this is the plan for the quarter or the semester, and just remind them right at the top.
Right. So the communication process we've talked about is letting our buildings put out specifically what their consequences are and what their policies are. And then from a district level, we'll put this policies out and ask for help from our parents and our community that, we work together and make sure that we're not letting technology get in the way of learning in the classroom.
Right. And I think just remembering, that the reason for the policy is that helping create healthy habits around cell phone usage and social media. You don't have to look very far to see the negative impacts. So it's a tool that can be used properly, but if not used properly, can be pretty darn harmful. So I think
Correct.
we have to just keep, we state that right at the top of the policy, but the why behind what we're doing. We're not just doing it for the sake of doing it.
Thank you.
So in terms of looking at August, then when we would approve this, or do we have 2 meetings in August? Our first one would be on.
I have,
August
I have an
6th.
August 6th work
Mhm.
session.
Yeah, so we could approve it on August 6th so that we've got enough time.
Right.
Gives
And
us
the
a couple
20th.
We
weeks
can
before.
roll it into the handbooks.
Yeah, great. All right. Any other comments from the high school counselor sitting next to us here? in the house?
Yeah, I
Or
had
you
one
guys are
running in my
looking-
head. Have we had much of an issue at the high school level? Because I assume that's where we'll probably get more.
Well, we just had this conversation today. I have not heard versus tardies and vaping and mental health, the cell phones,
Was at the bottom.
I haven't heard much about it.
Okay, well, that's
Doesn't mean
good.
it's not a problem, but I have not heard too much about it. But I do think this gives a little bit more teeth for the teachers in the classroom to be able to do what they want to do in the classroom.
Okay.
I have had just a side note that I've had a couple parents that are active in our younger grade, like in our 5 through 8 buildings, PTO. I think those organizations they've had some group meetings available to parents about cell phone usage and things. It might be good to just give them an extra prompt
Mhm.
to let them know, because they may want to do some supportive education.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Great. All right, if there are no other questions or comments on that. Do you have anything else in your superintendent report? Or are you ready to put on your other?
I
Dr.
will,
Huerta.
I will say thank you to Mrs. Scrovaner for coming in to present, and I am going to set up a meeting with her next week to discuss what she has and see if there's items we can mitigate, and if there's something we can do to mitigate, then we should do that. So I'll have a conversation and then bring it to the facilities committee.
Excellent. Great.
Yep, that's it. Thanks.
All right. Well, Dr. Puerta, stand in then. You can then take the next one as well.
All right, the ELA adoption overview is underneath the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. So we're looking to have a motion to approve the ELA adoptions and the HQIM supplemental material. This overview we did present last week to our President and Vice President, Mr. Eilert and Mrs. Mangan, and Dr. Puerta went through the different adoption overviews, 6th through 8th grade. We do not need to adopt anything at this time, so that's why that is not on there. But other than that, I would ask if there are any questions. We do have materials set out this evening as well.
These are over on the table over there.
Over on the table there, yes.
Do you mind just giving a brief overview of just the process that got us to this point of, I know that we're always reevaluating curriculum and deciding when things need to be updated, and some of it comes from state regulations. But you know, I'll just pick the one line items as the most expensive, the 9 through 12, going from collections to into literature. What prompts changes like that, and how do we reevaluate it? And I know that you're not Dr. Puerta.
Well, you put the curriculum on a curricular cycle to make sure that you're staying up to date. This has been quite a while since we've done any of the updates in the ELA. The ELA department, Mr. Damewood is the English department head, and he takes his department. They review the different course selections that you could have. What they landed on there was the into literature is the adopted curriculum proposed. It is with Harcourt Mifflin, and the 252,000 is over 6 years. So that would be a 6-year curricular cycle for the English language arts. And so there is the ability to have different course offerings as well when you get to high school. And so part of the process, hopefully I'm answering some of your, the process is your English department is going to go through with Dr. Puerta and make the selections they feel fit. They feel it fit into what they offer.
Kind of a substitution for what the old textbooks, were on a cycle before they wear out. But now you're in a license thing. And so we were going to spend money on some kind of a license for this curriculum, no matter what. This happens to be, and I asked Dr. Puerta, I said, is this, in essence, in line with the cost for other curriculums? And she said, yes, this is. And we'll have, then the next cycle will probably be math, I think, coming up, and we'll be looking
Right.
at something like this for math next.
And just one of the concerns I've had as we've transitioned from textbooks into licenses, and then from, forever licenses into limited licenses.
Yeah.
Is just the danger of cost creep. And, how often are we redoing this? And, hey, you've laid it out very clearly right now what it costs the district, but that could potentially be significant costs to the district over time. My assumption is that every publisher will be looking to increase the cost of their licenses and decrease the duration of their licenses.
Right, and that is something we talked about, that she's working hand in hand with Mr. SB to make sure that she's providing a clear look into, okay, here's our curricular rotations, here's what it looks to our forecast, and making sure. We did ask her as well, because for the high school, I can't remember what there was a couple they looked at, and they did get quotes from them, and they were all within, similar dollar amounts. Yeah. So, and some of this, being covered by state funds is my understanding is because
Correct.
of the science of reading.
Correct.
So, and our, all of our staff has to go through the science of reading.
Professional
continuing ed,
development.
Professional development, whether they're, teaching reading or not, everybody has to go through it. And so our staff, we're really trying to get them, we've asked that they all do that early, so that, because that reimbursement is separate from the state. So, there's kind of parallel paths, but that the items being covered are because of the new state curriculum, science of reading.
And I will say that there's essentially a forecast that we're building the 5-year forecast from the forecast of this. And so I've worked really closely with Dr. Puerta as well as Adam Samuels. And so we've been, working to make sure that we're mindful of costs, and then it informs the 5-year forecast.
And
So-
I do know Adam and Stacy were working with HMH. And they were able to get a $25,000 reduction in the original price. Being the older educator, I really thought when we were moving from textbooks to technology, we were going to get rid of this, and the textbook companies figured this out, didn't they? So we are, Adam and Stacy and John, I know do a very good job of developing this type of projection, but you're absolutely right. When you want to worry, make sure you worry you don't have creep as it continues.
Adam, I don't know if you've got any comments, just even thinking about that technology piece. I know there's been work done on open source kind of curriculum pieces and just where that is in development for high schools and.
So I think right now what you see generally in education is that anything open source tends to be more on the supplemental side to kind of go in addition to your core curriculum. There are companies out there that are actually taking open source resources and designing curriculum from that you can pay for. That usually winds up being more expensive than going with like a textbook company. So that's the downside. The upside is that, you would get catered curriculum to what you're looking for perfectly. But I think, yeah, with HMH, like Mike said, we were able to save 25,000 just from discussions with them and basically, again, the price down. And I think the challenge we see is what, all these textbook companies have figured out, and every really company in general outside of education, is that the subscription model wins, right? And so it's us trying to find ways just to continue every year to knock those costs down. So it does, kind of avoid some of that creep. But then also looking at ways, I look at our biology and physics moving into next year. They are continuing, they've got their hardbound books. They're continuing with those for next year and supplementing in other ways. So there's times where if we see a, opportunity to be able to extend either hardbound textbooks or things like that, we try to do that where we can too. The other big piece with a lot of these online resources is that after 5-6 years, sometimes even sooner, the textbooks online go out of print. So collections that we used to use for grades 9 through 12 for ELA, they said will no longer be available this upcoming year, which is part of the reason for moving into literature. So you do see some of those rewrites or discontinuing of resources that kind of almost force your hand to start looking into what else is out there. So yeah, one of the technology's got its upsides, but definitely one of the challenges that comes with it too. So.
Thank you. All right. Do we, any other questions or comments, or can we entertain a motion to approve the ELA adoptions and HQIM supplemental material?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
roll call, please.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes,
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mengen.
Yes.
thank you. All right, moving on to the approval of student handbooks. You've got those before you as well in the board docs. Any questions, comments about student handbooks that present? We have a motion then to approve these changes to the handbook.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mengen,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, moving on then to Mr. Collier's report. That, are you going to be doing that as well?
I will be
Wearing
standing
that?
in for Mr. Collier as well.
Got
Yep.
different hats. Maybe
Yeah.
a skin cap for Garth. You could-
Yeah, right. I hope he heard that. We are doing the Human Resources Employment Recommendations. It's a motion to approve as presented. I want to review just a few things that have been updated since we met last week. And under item A, number 7 and number 8, you'll see Ian Klingler. The resignation date has been changed. It's highlighted in yellow just since that's a change since the last time we had chatted with the board. Number 8, Julia Goret, resignation we just received, I believe, yesterday. So that is new to us on the docket here. So number 7 and number 8 under A have been changed. For B, employment of certified personnel, Danielle Lang. Chatted with her this morning, and she has accepted the LECC intervention specialist position. We are excited to have Danielle coming to us from Bellbrook. She's moving to Cincinnati. And so that has been added as well, so we could get her ready to go for next year. The next item is letter H. And under letter H, small letter H, you have for the employment, Donna Freebert is the high school receptionist at step 7, and that is effective August 13th of this school year. So those are the 4 changes that showed up since we have talked with the board. So I will ask if there are any questions to the HR report.
Just more of a comment when we talked to Mr. Collier last week, that we're getting good traffic for bus driver applicants from the additional things we've done at the food truck rally, the billboard we have, and so we're cautiously optimistic. on
We
that.
still do not have enough, but
I
yeah,
know. Yeah,
I believe he said we had about 5, and we did the billboard, we did the truck rally, and we've done some pointed Facebook ads, and so they seem to be working, but could always use some more bus drivers.
So last week I had texted you some information about being in the parade. Was that anything, any updates on that?
Somebody had, Mr. Ames?
Like having a bus in the 4th of July parade, because. Okay. Okay. Because this year is one of the largest. We have about 800 participants in the parade, and it's bringing a big crowd this year for our celebration. So I don't know if we want to consider. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right.
Let's chat tomorrow, and maybe we could just use a bus without the big sign and put on a different sign that we're not worried about, but we can chat a little bit more tomorrow. Yep.
Just keep me posted. I can get it in. Get in.
All right, thank you. Then do we have a motion to approve the resolutions of the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, including resignations and employment of certified classified homebound substitute and supplemental positions for the 23-24 and 24-25 school years?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
you roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jernick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert, I will let you know that Mr. Collier texted, he did hear the comment, so
Oh, good. Glad to know that.
mission accomplished.
Don't look at yourself.
All right, moving on then to the business manager report. You're up.
There are 3 items on there. These are all for 3-year contracts. The preventive maintenance contract, as I noted, we have used PCI for 10 years, and we have had Jeremy and Jerry, the 2 lead mechanics, on our equipment for all 10 years of that time. So as long as those 2 gentlemen are working with us, we plan to keep them at least for the next 3 years. They're the kind of guy that walk up and they'll hear a noise and know exactly what's going on. So you don't have to teach them what they're trying to figure out. And the other 2 are just standard. I just made it easier for my replacement not to have to worry about people trying to come in and sell them a new product. We have all Simplex control or fire alarm panels in the district, and Johnson Controls purchased Simplex. So it is just a standard thing that they do the repairs, or they do the checks. And we wanted to have it done at this board meeting so that they can do their district-wide checks August 1st before school starts. Everything's good.
Questions?
And no, I won't become a billboard bus driver for you.
Don't worry, we'll call you and ask you. Any questions for Mr. Ames? Your last chance to grill him with
This
really
is
hard
it.
questions.
This is it.
Any existential questions to have him in his retirement?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for your
you.
report and thank you for all of your work over all of these years. All right, so do we have a motion to approve? We do all three of these at once, or do we want to do them individually?
They're not consent, so we need to do them individually.
Okay. We have a motion then to approve the 3-year preventative maintenance contract with Process Construction Incorporated.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jarnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. You, and then motion to approve the quotation of Johnson Controls Fire Protection.
So moved.
The-
Second.
Sorry, the first, let's say the first of our, because we have 2 to do with them, so. So sorry. Motion with Eric.
So moved.
Second, Christina. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes,
Mrs. Jarnick.
Yes.
thank you. And then the motion to approve the 3-year fire alarm monitoring agreement with Johnson Control.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Dr. Swetchnow.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jarnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, on to our treasurer report.
Thank you, President Eilert, members of the board. I'd like to get started with my treasurer report. I will talk through the financial reports and the overarching themes that I think are quite important to hit. So we are currently 91.7% through fiscal year 24, which is 11 months. Our expenditures and revenues are currently showing a positive impact on the cash balance equal to 0.25% of our forecasted expenditures. So we're very, very close. The forecasted expenditures, when we look at any variances in expenditures or 0.07% variance for the forecasted expenditures, nothing really to report on in terms of one specific category or another, since the forecast was just filed last month. Revenues are 0.3% variance to forecast revenues. Again, nothing really of concern there with the revenues forecasted versus what we're seeing in actuals. When we look at our interest income, our month to date is $83,003.73, and fiscal year to date is $809,049.20. We are starting to see, and we will start to see next fiscal year, some of our longer term investments that the district had kind of locked themselves into 2-3 years ago are going to start maturing, and then we'll start investing in the higher yielding percentages that we're seeing with interest now. So that's going to be coming.
Have you done that with the forecast? In terms of what percentages are you using forecasting?
Yeah, so what I've done is I've worked with our investment advisors, Red Tree, and we typically talk probably every 2 weeks, if not every week, about the strategy of, where we're going. And that's what leads the forecast. So it's not necessarily any one percentage in any one line. We're looking at it overall, and then that's leading to the percentage that I actually forecast for the interest. And that's it. Any questions?
The Red Tree report is nice. Very
Yes.
clear. You can see where the different investments are and what the yield is. And so we'll start to see that change. Super helpful.
Yes, and you will also start to see a fiscal year to date starting next year.
Mhm.
We intentionally kept that off because it was hard to blend the Fifth Third investments and then the Red Tree. So you'll start to see a fiscal year to date where you can track each specific individual investment as well.
Great.
All right, thank you. Anything else from treasurer?
No?
Reports? We need a motion to, I guess we can do this without her, to accept the financial reports.
Second.
Roll call, please. wait 2 seconds for a roll. This is our resolution to accept the financial reports for May.
Okay.
Now we can roll call.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow.
Yes.
You. All right, and then we have got a 7.2, the set estimate versus actual variances to zero.
Yeah, this is just a
Explanation
procedural thing. It allows me to set the appropriations and the certificate to exactly what happened. Typically do that and then put a little buffer in case there's an emergency expenditure that's needed between now and the end of the fiscal year, but we've cut off all checks. No checks are going out. We've kind of shut things down and are closing the fiscal year and reconciling, getting some final POs closed for purchases that we know we're not going to need, and making sure that we carry over the least amount of POs as possible. So, but this allows just a procedural thing in the software, but I like to let you know that I'm doing it.
Great. Questions about that? We have a motion to authorize the treasurer to set up estimated amounts to actual amounts in the accounting software.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow.
Yes.
Thank you. And then 7.3, our final appropriations / amended certificate.
Yes, so this is the fund level reporting where you'll see the final budgets and the final revenues that lead to the certificate and the appropriations. I have to file this with the county auditor in order to be in compliance. So I'll be doing that hopefully after approval.
Anything that stood out to you in that work this year?
Nope, just procedural.
Great. Just
Following the rules and making sure we're well within the appropriations. Part of that is I bring appropriation resolutions to you every month now. So this is something that I told you I would start doing, I think in February. And so continuing to do this just keeps us in compliance.
Great. A motion to approve the fiscal year final amended permanent appropriation / amended certificate.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jarenick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes. And finally, payment in lieu of transportation.
Yeah, so we have one additional student that had applied, so bringing that to you for your approval.
All right, any questions about that?
Just remind me, and we've talked about this before, is there typically a communication with parents to make sure that they know that, hey, it's time to ask for this, and there's typically a cutoff date for which they're not allowed to continue to ask for it?
Yes to the first question. There hasn't been to the second question. We're working on that, spoken with our legal counsel and just basically creating a summary of how we're doing it now and then what our options are going forward. Because we have, we have to deem people impractical within 30 days of their enrollment. However, we're getting requests now at the end, after the school year already happened.
Mhm.
So it's only fair that there should be a cutoff date.
All right, so we'll continue to work on that with legal counsel, but for now, to approve this one request that has come, we have a motion to approve the resolution for transportation deemed to be impractical and approve the list of recommended schools and students.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
and roll call, please.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchnow,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jarenick.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, then finally, the severance payment agreement.
This is actually an agreement that we drafted to allow payout if we do have a deceased member of our staff. within the LEA. This is something that sometimes is covered in board policy. With our change from Neola to OSBA, it's not in the policy. So this essentially serves as just as good as it being in policy. We can look at potentially adding it to policy in the future. But it's just something that we think is the right thing to do.
Questions about this?
And so just as a clarification, and to my understanding, this isn't a change. It's just a different way to do it as we've changed providers and it's come out of our policy.
Correct.
This has been discussed with leadership of LEA. They're aware of
Yes.
this.
Yes.
All right, and then no other questions, then can we get a motion to adopt the resolution as presented?
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mrs. Bengen,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Reverend Eilert,
Yes.
Mrs. Jernick.
Yes.
Thank you. I got ahead of myself when I said finally, we do have 7.6 property and casualty insurance rates for fiscal year 25.
Yeah, and I do apologize for this making its way on the agenda towards the end, but we just got the rates just recently. Just the process that we go through with this is we apply back in March, and our insurance consultant applied and then essentially shopped rates with insurance providers. There is I would call a substantial reset in the premiums that we're seeing. There are actually insurers now that are not insuring schools in Ohio. That's due to the high payout in claims due to like tornadoes and the weather that we've seen. It's been primarily what the driver is. There are also, I've probably learned more about insurance, property and casualty in the last, I don't know, month than I care to talk about. But when we see an increase, and we did see an increase of around 37% on this premium, it's something that we dig into, but also something that's driving it is an increase in property values as well. As property values go up, our insured rate or the amount that we're insuring goes up as well. And also the cost to rebuild something if it were to be a catastrophic event. We feel that this is the right thing to do. Mr. Ames and I worked with our school insurance consultants, our consultant on this, and this is our recommendation to the board for next year.
Was this already in the May forecast, or is this going to be a?
It's good. It was not in there because I didn't have that information. It's about, in that line item, it's about 10% short.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So that'll be something that we adjust.
You had miscellaneous at the bottom, just about SROs and premiums and how there's one included. How many do we have, and do we have an idea of what each one costs in premium?
So that's something that we actually had spoken about when we met with our consultant. So we did get that information. We have not, heard back just because the meeting was last week.
Okay.
He's having to, because the rates got returned, all of his clients he's having to meet with in essentially 2 weeks. So he's been
Happy.
man on the run lately, I think. When things slow down, we'll be able to get that adjustment. I don't see it being a large sum of money.
Questions about?
One more question I'd just like to point out, is the cyber insurance part of it new?
We've always had cyber. This is, I believe, a different carrier this year.
Gotcha.
I don't know if you were aware of it, but the news about West Claremont's cyber attack is that as our insurance provider looked at that just to make sure that we would be covered in that scenario.
They are,
That's the right
he
question.
works with that district as
Okay.
well.
Okay.
So
right.
well aware of the situation.
Mhm.
That's more of a social engineering
Right, yep.
than a hack.
Mhm.
And so that falls into a different line item of insurance
Mhm.
coverage. But yes, very, very scary things. And just so you know, we have processes in place to prevent what happened.
Mhm.
There's a process where I approve any vendor change. The assistant treasurer approves any vendor change, and then it's changed on the vendor screen.
Mhm.
So, and we're actually implementing now, and I have no problem saying this out loud. So if you try to do this, this is what's going to happen. It's not going to, we're not going to let it happen if you're one of the bad guys listening, or watching later. But essentially, we make sure that we verify information that only that vendor would know if they're asking for us to change specific data, like where the check goes to or what bank account it gets deposited to. I won't say what that specific information is, but we're checking it.
Great.
So real dollar wise, like $50,000 increase, and you would forecasted a slightly smaller increase. Or maybe
Yeah,
approximately, right?
it's around a little bit sub 50, but yes.
Those, that just on the social engineering. It's good to pay attention to the payroll system. I mean, I know you are, you're very good with controls, but that is something where I had somebody send it, at a prior employer, send us a spoofing email into our HR group, think like it was me to change my direct deposit. And the HR person responded, Lynn, you know that you have to do this yourself, but the accounting person changed it for me. So, I mean, we caught it before it hit payroll, but just a great reminder to remind, like what you're saying, that you only change if the vendor provides you information.
Yes. And when we do see things, we report to the FBI as well. So that's just our process. If we see something strange, I'd rather report it and it check out as nothing
Yep.
than it go undetected and other people be affected.
All right, there are no further comments, and entertain a motion to adopt the resolution as presented to adopt the insurance rates for fiscal year.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jarnick,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangan,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Reverend Eiler.
Yes. All right, I believe that completes our agenda for the day. So entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Like a second to me, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, meeting adjourned at 6:58 PM.